Well, what's up, Real Life Simi Valley? How's it going today? Yeah, you're awake. You made it to church. You're alive and still breathing. That's all you can ask for today, right? Well, my name is Michael. I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Real Life, and I want to just say welcome and glad that you are here. Can we just take a moment to celebrate the greatest thing that has happened in the last couple of weeks? That the Rams won a Super Bowl, right? Come on now. I know you 49er fans are all just grumpy, but booyah, right? We won in your face. And I think what is even better than the Rams winning the Super Bowl was the fact that 2 weeks before that, the Rams finally beat the 49ers after 6 straight losses. It was amazing. I'm not sure which win was better, beating the 49ers or winning the Super Bowl. But after the Super Bowl, or after the NFC Championship game where the Rams beat the 49ers, I was really excited to go to the Super Bowl because I'm like, listen, in my lifetime, this is the first time I've ever lived this close to a Super Bowl game. I have to go. I have things I want to do in my life. They're called bucket lists that I'm sure you probably have as well. And one of them is to go to a Super Bowl, right? I mean, I always wanted to go to the Super Bowl. Who wouldn't want to go to the Super Bowl? Plus, my team is playing in the Super Bowl. So yes, I want to go. So I was really excited. So as soon as we won the NFC Championship game, the next day I got online and I wanted to go buy tickets. And I just told myself, I said, okay, if those tickets are between, $100 and $300, I'm going. Why are you laughing? You didn't think I had a realistic vision of what those tickets could be like? I was for sure that, the most I'll pay is $200, but they can't be that expensive. That's what I assumed, okay? I literally assumed that they couldn't be more than $300. I must have been looking in the wrong decade. Look at this graphic here. Did you know that in 1989, you could go see the Super Bowl for $100? $100. Did anybody know who played in the 1989 Super Bowl? Cincinnati Bengals and the San Francisco 49ers. Boo. Okay? Right? So for $100, you could go watch Jerry Rice catch the game-winning touchdown. Okay? For $100. Did you know that this past Super Bowl, who's ever been to SoFi Stadium? Raise your hand if you've been to SoFi Stadium. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. At the top of SoFi Stadium, now I know they got that huge screen and it's awesome and it's great, but at the very top, the last seat on the top row of SoFi Stadium, $5,500 to watch Super Bowl. Okay, $5,500 to watch Super Bowl. Now, when I saw that, I was like, okay, don't panic, Michael. They're going to go down. Okay, I just told myself they're going to go down. I have faith. Okay, so a week goes by. I was checking those tickets every day, like 3 times a day. Okay, a week goes by, and I go to look, and they did go down. $5,400 for the nosebleed seats. Okay, the day before the game, that was the cheapest price you could get it at, $3,500, nosebleed seats. Now, as we got closer and closer to the game, I started feeling this anxiety that I was going to miss out on this chance to be able to go to this game. And I kept feeling like this anxiousness, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out. This is like the one time I'm going to live close to a Super Bowl. I mean, maybe not, because the Rams are awesome. We'll probably get back again. But the Super Bowl won't be there. It won't be in SoFi Stadium again, probably for another 5 or 6 years. So I started feeling this anxiousness and just, Do you know that anxiousness I was feeling? It's this phenomenon called FOMO. Have you ever heard of this before? You ever heard of this? Fear of missing out, right? I'm sure you've all experienced. Let me give you the definition. It basically means it's a fear of not being included in something, such as an interesting or enjoyable activity that others are experiencing. Okay. Now, you may have experienced FOMO in all sorts of things. Maybe a friend had told you that they were going to take a vacation, and you were like, man, I wish I was going to that vacation. And I don't know, maybe some anxiety crept up in you. Or maybe you were at work, and your coworkers started talking about lunch plans right around you. Literally, they're all gathered around your desk, and they're talking about lunch plans, and they haven't invited you yet. And you're just wondering, are you going to invite me? Because you're standing at my desk talking about lunch, right? Maybe you experienced FOMO that way. We all experience this. And the reason, and what we do with it is we start to chase after the things that we are fearful that we're going to miss out on. And we chase after all kinds of things because we are looking for things that we think will make us happy, that will satisfy the craving of life. But oftentimes, we're missing out on the true and good things that we actually need in this life. Let me just give you an example of this. You see, there are things that we want and we chase after versus there are things that we should really fear missing out on. Like we chase after experiences all the time. We chase after things that we think, if I do this, if I'm able to be a part of this, if I get to experience this, then I will feel better about my life. But what we should really chase after, what we should really fear missing out on is modeling a legacy. We should fear missing out on the fact that at some point in time we're going to be gone and somebody's going to tell a story about us. What kind of story do you want them to tell about you? You know, we chase down random acts of kindness. Now, here's what I mean by this. You ever be at the store and you walk out of the store and you see the homeless person sitting right there and you run into this conundrum, this feeling, should I help them or should I not help them? And then you start thinking, well, what good deed have I done recently? Well, it's been since 1947 since I last did something good, so maybe I should help them. And so then you help them, and what do? You feel good. You feel better about yourself afterwards. And so then it'll be another 20 years before you do another random act of kindness, right? But what we should really fear on missing out on is daily humility. That every day we realize and recognize that we sit in the second chair and someone is always in the first chair. How about this? We chase after knowing God's will. For those of us who follow Jesus, you're going to be like, wait, aren't we supposed to want to know God's will? Yes, but the reason we chase after it is not for the best reason. The reason most of us chase after God's will is because we experience this anxiety of not knowing what's coming. And so we are always asking God, okay, God, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do, God? What do you want me to be, God? God, can you tell me if this is going to get better, if this is going to happen, if this is going to be better? That's what we're chasing God's will for. We're not really chasing it for the benefit of God. We're chasing it for the benefit of us. What we should really want and fear missing out on is advancing God's kingdom. Is that every day we're doing everything we can in our own self, in our own environment, own life, to help people find and follow Jesus. And then let the rest figure it itself out. Be more focused on today than worrying about tomorrow. Here's another thing. You know, we often chase after being rich. Now, here's the thing. I think if we all we're honest this morning, we all say we would love to be rich. And not just like rich, like comfortable, like dirty, nasty. Every time I get in my shower, I'm swimming in a $1 or $100 bill tub, right? Like there's just money just flowing everywhere, right? I lay in a bed and my blanket is a knitted blanket of $100 bills. That's the kind of dirty rich I'm talking about. Who wouldn't want to be that kind of rich? If we're being honest, okay? But that's not what really we should be wanting in this life. What we should really be chasing after, what we should really fear missing out on is to be blessed. And those two things are very different things. They're very different. We should want a blessed life. And if we're all being honest with what we truly mean by being a blessed life, it isn't so much about being rich. It isn't so much about being comfortable. It's mostly knowing that we are living in a way that has God's supernatural fingerprint all over it. A blessed life means we have deep contentment that God has got this, right? You ever seen that show? I grew up on this show called George Lopez, and he all the time in the show he would say like something when like his wife Angie would do. He'd be like, "Can you really do it?" He'd be like, "I got this," right? This is how I imagine God saying it to us. I'm like, God, please, can I get like $200,000 right now? And God's like, I got this. You don't need that. And I'm like, are you sure? Right? So last week, Rusty kicked off this series called Making Change, where we are looking at a life that is blessed more than it is rich. Now, if this is your first time here at Real Life Church Simi Valley, I want you to understand that we don't always talk about money. This is not like you're like, oh gosh, my first time and they're talking about money today. It's not every week that we walk in here and we're like, hey, we're going to talk about money today. It's not. But today, it's important. And in this series, it's important because we want to help you understand that if you don't put money in its proper place, it will lead us to start chasing the wrong things in the wrong way. Again, it's not about being or living a rich life. It's about being and living a blessed life. And there's a clear difference between the two. So today I want to talk about this idea of first things. Or maybe a better way of saying this is about priorities, okay? Now, did you know that if the first thing you did when you woke up in the morning is make your bed, that you are 25% more likely to feel productive at the end of the day? Isn't that a crazy stat? That if you wake up and before you do anything, brush teeth, use the restroom, anything, you make the bed, you will feel 25% more likely. You will feel productive by 25% at the end of the day. It's nuts. Now that's hard for me because one, I don't like to make the bed. I just hate it. It's just like one of the most annoying things you have to do. Two, I don't even like getting out of the bed in the morning. Seriously, I tell my wife, just make it over me. Just make the bed over me. I will figure out how to get out later, okay? But yeah, studies have shown that if you make the bed first thing in the morning, first thing you do, you are 25% more likely to feel productive. Here's another thing. Do you know that if the first thing you did when you woke up in the morning is drink a room temperature glass of water, that it can increase your metabolic rate of digesting food by 25%. So if you've had some, food digestion problems and you need to fix that, studies show that if you drink a room temperature glass of water in the morning, it will help that. Now, here's the problem for me. One, I don't like water. Crazy, because our bodies are made up of like 65% of it. Two, the first thing I really want to drink when I get up in the morning after I just brush my teeth is not water. It's an ice cold glass of Coca-Cola. That's what I think about in the morning. I know I'm a sinner. I need help. But I'm just telling you, that's what I'm thinking about in the morning. Now, some of you are not thinking about water. You're thinking about that stuff called motor oil, or as everybody else calls it, black coffee, right? That stuff is gross. Did you know that if you use the word you, Y-O-U, if you use the word you in the first 5 seconds of a phone call or a video call or a conversation with a person or speaking to an audience, that studies have shown that the audience or that person is 67% more likely to be engaged in your conversation. So I hope you will all listen to what I'm going to say today because I believe it will benefit you and what we're going to talk about today. You feel more engaged already? All right. Here's the thing. The reality is that what we do first really matters. It's super important, the things we do first. Think about this. I mean, your first birthday, right? And if you've not had a first birthday, that means you're not alive. So there you go, unless you're a baby. I guess you have babies. Your first kiss. You remember your first kiss? Okay. How about your first graduation, for those of you who've graduated already? Your first anniversary, whatever that may be. How about your first job? You remember your first job, right? How about your first kid, for those of us who've had kids? Like, what we do first will always matter in our lives. Think about this. Why do you think people say all the time that it matters what you do on your first impression? Your first impression makes a difference, right? I remember when I first met my wife, when we were both working at Applebee's on a date night. Got that Bourbon Street steak with that Oreo shake, right? Get some whipped cream on the top too. 2 straws, 1 check. Girl, I got you. We did. This is a true story. We actually met at Applebee's. I was a server and she was the host there. And we really didn't like each other because the first impressions we made on each other is I thought she was really rude and she thought I was ugly. That's weird. I don't know why. Right? But because of my debonair personality, the greatest Applebee's love story happens. Right? First impressions really matter. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me share with you a principle that we're going to focus on today. And in fact, this week of all weeks is probably the most important principle to glean from. Why? Because regardless of where you are in your faith journey, whether you've been following Jesus for a long time or you're just now trying to figure out what does it mean to live for Jesus and who does Jesus mean to you, it doesn't matter. If you apply this principle to your life, it will change the way you view and live your life. And it has everything to do with what we do first. Okay? So here's the principle. Very simple. When you give God your first, you will experience God's best. Okay? When you give God your first, you will experience God's best. You see, the way we experience the blessed life that we're talking about is by putting God first in every area of our lives. Now, if we truly believe that God is really God and he's this big and powerful, all creator, all sustaining God, then he should be first in every area of our lives. I love the way that JCLU, which is a Christian apparel brand, how they put this. They said, the secret to a happy life is giving God the first part of your day, the first priority to every decision, and the first place in your heart. If God is first, our life will begin to function the way God intended it to. Which also means that the opposite is also true. That if God is not first in your life, then your life is out of order. Now, this doesn't make you a bad person. I know many people who love Jesus and follow Jesus, but Jesus isn't the first in every part of their lives. Maybe he's first here and here, but he's not first here or there. Okay? God can't be second. He's not a second place God. He's a first place God. He's a sit on the throne of your heart, soul, and mind kind of God. And he made that very clear in all of his writings that to us throughout the history of time. I mean, if you go back to one of the most familiar writings in the first half of the Bible, in a book called Exodus, we see God give Moses, the leader of the people, these 10 different principles, these way of living, 10 commandments, right? And one of the very first commandment he makes is about how we ought to relate to him, how he cannot be second, third, or fourth in their life. Here's what he says. He says, I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other gods but me. God says, I need you people to remember, I am the one who freed you from 400 years of oppression and slavery. I gave you freedom from tyranny and from constraint. Now, did the people deserve to be rescued? Did God owe them or something? No, he didn't. But he does it because he wants to, because he's a giver. That's who God is. And he wanted to give them and us the ability to live a life that is blessed. But in order to do that, God needed us to understand that that only comes by way of making him first. Now, why is that important? Why would God need to say right off the bat that he needs to be the first in our life? You see, I think it's because God understands our tendency to shift to other things when we become distracted. You've noticed that about yourself? That you'll be focused on something and something comes in and to distract you and then you completely move off what you were focused on to do that other thing? Now, you might call that ADHD. I just call that being human, right? It's often that we're focused and then we get distracted and we veer off and we do other things. Something else takes our attention away. Time, energy, work, money, finances, whatever it may be, distracts us from what we really should be focused on. And God understood that. So the very next thing he says to the people is this. He says, you must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or on the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. Now, it's easy to read that and assume, well, that's not me, Michael. I don't worship any other gods. Like, I assume that if I were to go to your house, I'm not going to find like some bronze statue in your basement with fire coming out of it and you're bowing down and worshiping to it, right? That there's not a golden calf sitting in your family room mantle that every day you and your family get around morning, afternoon, and evening and you're bowing down and you're worshiping that. I'm assuming that. I'm going to assume the best about you. If you are doing that, come find me afterwards. Let's talk, okay? But I'm assuming that. But here's the thing. While we may not be literally worshiping, or while we may not be worshiping idols in the literal sense, we can be just as tempted with pouring our attention and affection into everyday things of our life. I mean, think about it. We bow down to our agenda. We bow down to our schedule. We bow down to our material possessions. And we could potentially bow down to even other people. And so God says, listen, I know the human heart so well. I know that it has the propensity to latch on to whatever it desires if left unchecked. So God is saying to us, latch on to him. Latch on to him, and he promises you will experience his best for you. Notice what I said there. I didn't say that you experience what you think is best, but you will experience what God believes is best for you. And that's the best way to live life. So the natural question that you might be having right now is, okay, well, how do I know what's first in my life? If I'm not sure that God is first, then how do I know what is first so I can deal with that? And I would say the easiest way to determine that is by asking yourself a series of questions, with the first one being, what do I believe will most bless me? And not, now, let me caveat that. Don't ask what you hope you believe will be most blessing to you, but what you actually believe will be the most blessing to you right now. Maybe for some of you, it's coffee, okay? Like, for some reason, you wake up and you're like, please don't talk to me. Please don't look at me. Please don't even breathe in my area of space until I've had 1, 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee. Because if you don't, then maybe you look like this. Right? There's some of you out there like, that's not funny because that's actually how I look before I get coffee. Don't talk to me. Right? Maybe some of you believe it's exercise. Like you're still working on that freshman 15, 30 years later. But you think as soon as I get that done, I'm going to be great. My life is going to be all put together. I'm going to be amazing. And so that's what you think you'll be most blessed by. Some of you are, maybe it's social media. You're living vicariously through whatever your favorite influencer is, Joanna Gaines and all her shiplap, or whoever it may be that you're just obsessed with and you're constantly strolling. And you think your best life is going to come through living through social media. I mean, this can be true of our time and our money. I mean, think about this. You give whatever is first, your time and your money. Whatever is living on the throne of your life, you will put every effort towards that, your time and your money. Like when crisis hit, you are more likely going to put first whatever you think will protect you from ruin, right? So like when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, a lot of us, what did we do? We went and checked our bank accounts. Right? We went and checked our 401ks, our IRA accounts, our investments, our stocks, right? To make sure that, oh my gosh, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to lose all my money. Some of us didn't even care about that. We ran to the store because we wanted to make sure we had this. Right? We're like, I don't care about money. I got to make sure I got toilet paper. Whatever is important, whatever is first in your life, you will put every effort and energy towards. Whatever we think is going to bless us the most is what we move to first. So that should be the first question you're asking yourself. What do I believe will bless me the most? Because that is first in my life. And I just want to be honest with you. We all struggle with giving God our first because at the heart of it, we struggle to trust him. Can I be honest with you? Can I tell you a little secret? Pastors, we struggle with this as well too. People who work in a church, we struggle with this. So we are no different than you. We all struggle, every one of us struggle to trust God with our first because we're not sure if we can always trust him, even though he's told us over and over and shown us over and over how trustworthy he is. But in order for us to see God's blessing in our life, we have to understand two things. Last week, Rutsy talked about this. Number one, God owns it all. God owns it all. We don't own any of it. We're only just managers of it. And here's number two. We have to put God first. If God owns it all, then we have to put God's first to experience his blessing. So I'm going to give you some examples of what we see in the Bible of how this principle of first really plays out. There's this moment in the book of Mark. Mark recorded this moment that was told to him by some other disciples that Jesus did in his daily routine. And so in Mark chapter 1, Mark writes this: before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Now, right in this moment, we see the principle of first. Jesus got up early in the morning, and what's the first thing he does? He finds a quiet space and he spends time with God the Father. So if it's important for Jesus to spend time to give the first part of his day to God, how much more important is that for you and me? Here's another example. In Proverbs, this book was written by a guy named Solomon, who was the son of King David. And Solomon was considered the most wisest man to ever have lived on earth outside of Jesus, right? He had the most wisdom of anybody. And here's what he says. He says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then you will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. Now, immediately upon reading that, your mind probably automatically went to money here, okay? But what you have to understand yes, part of this is about money, but it's so much more than that. That word wealth, the Hebrew word, the original language, that word basically means your whole life. So if you were to exchange that word, wealth, then it would read like this: honor the Lord with your whole life, with the best parts of everything you produce. Everything. Give it all. You see, the promise is that when we do, there's an overflow of return. When we honor God with the best parts of our whole life, God promises that there's an overflow of return. Now, what that overflow looks like may not necessarily always be money. It may not necessarily always be riches or fame or whatever you may be thinking of, but it's always going to be what is good for us. There's this story, greatest example of this. There's a story in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, okay? Kind of that book outlines how we all end up on this rock that we call earth and how we were all created, okay? And there's these two brothers, Cain and Abel. And they both bring these gifts or offerings to God. And God blesses Abel's offering, but not Cain's offering. Now, why? Because they both brought gifts to God. They both bought things that were valuable to give to God, but God only blesses one of them. Here's why. It says, when it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some. Now, the emphasis is mine, but I wanted you to see that. He presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the what? Firstborn lambs of his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gifts. You see the difference? Cain brought what was left, what was available, the leftovers, right? Whereas Abel put God first and brought God the best of the firstborn. And because of Abel's willingness to give God his first, God blesses Abel's offering over Cain. So again, why is it so important for us to give him our first? Because the first is a gift of trust. Do you understand that? It's a gift of trust. Like, do you remember when you were a kid and you were probably out like with your friends? They were going to play like a game, kickball, baseball, let's put makeup on somebody, whatever it may have been, right? Okay. And your friend is going to choose the first person. You wanted to be first, right? You wanted to be the first player picked for your baseball, kickball, football team, makeup team, right? You want to be the first person picked. Why? Because if your friend picked you first, they were basically saying, I trust you over anybody else more than anybody else. You believe that God is the same way? When he's asking for the best of our best, he's saying, look, I only want that because it tells me that you trust me More than anything else you could have put this towards. You trust me. It communicates that. Now, I imagine that there are probably some of you who are sitting here today, or maybe watching this online later in the week, and you're probably thinking to yourself, you know what, I don't need God's blessing. I've done well for myself. Well, let me tell you, so did Cain. Cain was a successful farmer. And I guarantee you, I bet you, and we can assume that at the end of his life, he wished he had had God's blessing. He had wished that he lived God's best for himself. Because our souls will always crave more. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money you got, how nice your house is, how hot your spouse is, how cool your car is, how great your job is, how much your 401k has. It doesn't matter any of that. Because once you even get that, your soul will continue to crave more. Our souls are a bottomless pit for this world and what this world has to offer. The only thing that can satisfy our soul is what comes from God. Let me put it this way. The blessing that our soul craves can only be satisfied by the blessing God gives. So let me give you just three things. Three things that I think you can begin to look at and wrestle with and put God first in your life in these three areas. The first thing is your time. Maybe that means the morning. Maybe that means carving out intentional time during the day or during the month to be alone. We have a guy on our staff. His name is Dave Wilson. Really cool guy. He leads our residency program. Dave takes 1 month or 1 day out of every month, and he has what is called the Day of Solitude. And he gets away from family, from friends, from electronics, and he goes by himself and he spends that day with God, reading, praying, meditating. Maybe for you, it's just 30 minutes a day. Just 30 minutes a day with God. It can change your life. How about this? Your talent. Each of us has been given what I call God-given talents. We all got different skills that God has blessed us with. Some of you are really great artists. Some of you are really great musicians. Some of you are just really smart. Some of you are really athletic. And you can use your athleticism or your artisticness or your musical ability or your intellect to benefit God, which will then benefit others. Case in point, there's a guy by the name of Warwick Dunn. He played at Florida State University. Go Noles. Okay, he had amazing athletic talent. He was a football player, and he used his talent to get him to the NFL. Not because he wanted to be rich, not because he wanted to be famous. Honestly, he used every bit of his money. He saved up everything, every bit of his money he made in his very long career in the NFL. You know what he does with that money now? He takes that money and he builds homes for the disproportionate and the underprivileged. Did you know that since 1989, I think it is, he has given away for free 200 homes that he's built for people. And he doesn't ask anything in return. Maybe it's time for you to devote your talent to God. And then the last thing is your treasure. Now, right after God rescues the people from Egypt, remember we talked about that earlier, God rescues them. Right after he rescues them, he instructs Moses to write out a set of principles in this book called Leviticus that he wants the people to live by. And one of those principles is this. He says, 1/10 of the produce of the land, whether grain from the fields or fruits from the trees, belongs to the Lord and must be set apart as holy. Must be set apart to him as holy. Now, you may have heard of this, but 1/10 is basically referred to as a tithe. Now, God didn't want it all back, okay? He didn't want it all back. He only wanted the top of whatever it was. Now, notice how he told Moses that all of it actually belongs to God and must be set apart. God is saying, look, none of it belongs to you or to anyone but me. But I only want the best of the best, the top of the top. Why? Because it communicates that you trust me. I mean, think about this. Think about this. For most of us who are poor in here, the government takes 20% off our income taxes, right? Right off the bat, boom, 20% is gone. Now, if you're in a higher tax bracket, I'm sorry, it's probably more. I'd like to become friends with you afterwards, okay? But that's just the tax from the government. How about this? Then later on, we pay sales taxes on the things we buy when we buy chips at the store or buy clothes or whatever we do on Amazon, right? There's sales taxes that come off of that, right? How about this? For those of you who own a home, you're paying property taxes on the home. Did you know that it costs, I don't know if you know this, but I just paid my registration fee. It cost me an arm and a leg and a half a lung to get my car registered. You know you got to pay those fees or you get pulled over, okay? You have to pay that. How about this? The schools that your kids go to, if they're not private, if they're public, your taxes pay that. So you got money coming off of that as well too. How about the taxes to maintain the roads that you're driving on? As one person told me, he said, you know what? If you told me, like this principle with God only paying a tenth of it, if you told me that I could keep 90% of my money, why wouldn't I sign up for that? I mean, I think the principle makes sense. Here's the thing. It doesn't belong to us. God doesn't want it back because he needs it. He wants that tenth because it shows that we trust him. He wants us to give him our first so we can experience his best. That's the bottom line. If you walk away with anything today, God wants you to give him your first, not just in your money, not just in your treasure, but in your time and your talent, in every area of your life. Why? Because it communicates that you trust him. And if you trust him, I guarantee you, or your money back, you will experience God's best for your life. Take a look at this story from Cindy and Dan and how they experienced God's best for their life.